There's been so much talk about voter fraud, voter registration fraud, trouble with people who've registered. What will happen on Election Day? With more on what you might see, Jonah Goldman, he's the director of the National Campaign for Fair Elections, and he's one of the leaders in Election Protection Coalition, our partners this election season to help make your vote count. Jonah, are you there?
I'm here.
What sort of problems are you anticipating?
Well, I think that we're going to see that most voters are going to have no problems when they get to the polling place. Unfortunately, some will. There'll be problems with long lines. There'll probably be problems with confusion with poll workers. But generally, it's important for voters to know that they have a resource in the Election Protection Coalition, an 866-hour vote, which they can call and get guided through the process, or they could visit 866hourvote.org, which has a wealth of information.
Jonah, what's the biggest misunderstanding that voters have about what can and cannot happen to them if they show up at the polls?
Sure. Well, I think that there are a number of misunderstandings, but I think that one of the biggest misunderstandings is this difference between voter registration fraud and voter fraud. Voter registration fraud, unfortunately, we've heard a lot about in the news, but that doesn't actually transfer to ineligible voters at the polling place. Instead, voters need to know that while laws differ from state to state and from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, that they really can get guidance through election protection.
And again, if they've got outstanding parking tickets or speeding tickets, none of that matters if they're going to vote, right?
That's right. That's right. That's right. There's a lot of misinformation that goes around election season. Some of it is deliberate, some of it's accidental. But yeah, that's absolutely right. Voters who haven't paid their parking tickets can still get to the polling place, and you won't be arrested. You should be able to cast a ballot just like everybody else. If you haven't paid your child support, these are all things that are often the subject of misinformation and deceptive practices that happen on and around election day.
Yeah, it might make you a bad person, but that doesn't mean you cannot vote. What can voters do in advance so that there are no problems when they show up at the polls?
I think it's very important this year, especially. It's really important to prepare to vote, and it's actually quite simple and it's quite quick. Voters should verify their voter registration. They can do that by calling their local boards of elections, or they can call us at 866-HOUR-VOTE. You need to know where your polling place is. Even if you've been at the same polling place for 20 years, your polling place may have moved. You can check that out again at 866-HOUR-VOTE or 866hourvote.org. And then you should also know when the polls are open and what type of identification you need, and to make sure that you prepare that way. But then I think it's also important in this year with a historic political season, that you don't just prepare yourself, but you also prepare 5 of your friends and family. Make sure that they've got everything they need to get to the polls and cast a meaningful ballot.
Jonah Goldman, the director of the National Campaign for Fair Elections at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. Jonah, thanks for coming on today.
So thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. NBC is making your vote count. If you have a question about voting or problems at the polls, our partners at Election Protection can help. They have trained volunteers available to answer your questions. Call 1-866-HOUR-VOTE. Again, if you have a question or if you run into problems, 1-866-HOUR-VOTE.